So, we are your hosts today. As far as I'm concerned, well, I'm based in France, as you probably hear. And I'm working with friends in different countries in French and English as a coach. I'm working for executive coaching, C-suite coaching, team coaching, organizational coaching, and I'm also a supervisor and an expert in talent management. And more specifically here for EMCC Global, I've been engaged for years for as a volunteer for accreditation, as a facilitator, assessor, verifier, and I'm regularly present at the 5-day challenge organized by EMCC Global. And I was a prior member of EMCC France board and prior leader for accreditation in France as well. And
well, I'm very pleased to be here with you tonight, or today, or this morning. I don't know what I should say. I don't want to read whatever is written, just to say that it's really a pleasure to be together to reflect with Sam, with this very specific approach. We're going to be in poetry, in art. And I think if we look at all of us like works of art, maybe that would change the world we're living in. So I'm very happy and grateful that we're having this wonderful time together tonight. And I'm French as well, as you can hear it.
Nicola is the third.
Yes,
hello,
of the team.
Here. I've never been described as a work of art before, but I'll take that, Anne. Thank you. No, all works of
You
art.
are.
So wonderful. I am your designated Zoomer for today. It's lovely to have you.
So, what is the genesis of this project? Well, as we told you, we are EMCC Global volunteers engaged in the facilitation and mentoring for accreditation. And we really insist each time on the importance of the reflective and reflexive approach. But the fact is that we've observed something, not only in Europe, but all over the world, that few professionals really know what it is about, really, and most important, how to embed this practice in the professional practice of the coach as a dynamic process, a journey for continuous professional development. So that's the way it came about 1.5 years ago. I think it's about that, yes. And we had the idea to propose webinars every 2 months with alternatively very well-known model to experiment, and alternatively a VIP, a special guest, well-known in the world for the creative approach around reflexivity and reflection. So that's how it came. So, of course, we want to insist on one point. This does not replace supervision, of course, even if the reflective approach and the reflexive approach is a part that can be worked on in supervision, of course. But this is made to practice, to experiment, and this is not a supervision session, to be very clear. Okay?
Okay, so why we're here is really to practice, because we learn by practicing. Like anything, we're learning, and we need to do it again and again. So the more variety of models we have, or the more options, and the better it is. So here we will have a presentation, a quick presentation, first of all, with us, so that it's understandable what we're here to achieve. And really why we're here, it's because we've been facilitating with Catherine for a while, this 5-day challenge. And we found out that a lot of the participants, they found it difficult to understand what is reflective and reflective practice. And that's the reason why we're here, to give some options and ideas of what it is and how it can be playful, and rather than something boring. So we're here to play tonight in a safe space to experiment this very key practice in our learning journey. So hopefully you'll leave this space with more ideas about what is reflexivity and activity. And hopefully you can practice that and feel comfortable with it.
So what's in it for you exactly? Well, the focus here with you is really to celebrate your practice and to experiment, as we told you. So we will specifically focus as well for all those of you who aim at accreditation, but not only. It's just a session, very practical one, to just play with it and embedded it in your practice as an everyday practice. What we told you about the format and alternative reflexive sessions. So this was the first semester planning.
And all the sessions are available on the website, on EMCC Global. You can find both the webinars, the recording, and the slides. And you will have those as well for today's.
Yeah. And here we are on session number 5 with Sam Magill. We have a session tomorrow in French, and the 2 next ones will be with the core model in next November. And at the beginning of 2025, we will have Marissiaux with us to experiment a specific way to reflect. So a few words about reflective.
And reflexive.
What are we talking about?
Okay. Well, the reflective approach is what is usually done, and we do it very naturally. We like to step back and understand the situation like if we were in a helicopter view. So reflective is quite standard.
And the second part of it is very important. It's the reflexive part of it. Learning and challenging oneself to keep growing, considering this 360 view of the situations. How is it going to challenge us? So to come into more details.
Yes, so really when we think about the reflective practice, we are about, okay, sorry, I'm lost. So yes, we're talking about understanding self. It's a competence in the reference model of EMCC. So there's really, it's how we understand ourselves, how we understand others, which means our clients and the systems they're in, how we understand the context, the coaching, what does it mean? And all of this is linked, of course, to our values, whether they are our personal or professional values, the organizational values, the social values, I would say the cultural values, and all of these helps and supports developing a critical consciousness.
Yeah.
Sorry.
From that, we can go further to the reflexive part of it and challenge our own assumptions, attitudes, prejudice sometimes, habits, skills, and develop reflexive questions about ourselves as a coach, but also for the coachees, for the organizations. And all this is about getting more and more ethical maturity, choosing our specific position, developing mastery, enriching our practice. What will I choose to do or to say? What do I learn from this situation, and how this learning outcome is going to adjust or enrich my practice? That's the core of the journey. And it's very important to integrate that we have to go until that part. Usually what we see with Anne is that practitioners, they, okay for the first part, but about how it challenges me and what are the learning outcomes and what will I do concretely speaking with the learning outcomes. That's another affair. Sam, you want to add something?
No,
No, I thought, sorry, I thought you were just going to say something. Okay.
It's about growing.
It's about, and that's really the fascinating part of the accreditation journey and of our professional development.
Mm.
If you want to see more details, what EMCC Global expectations are, you have this link. Maybe, Nicola, you can put it in the chat if you have it. Oh, yeah, great. Thank you so much. This is the Poetics practice guide that will give you a good approach of what EMCC Global speaks about. And you will see that it can be about reflection on action. Afterwards, it can be reflection for action, for the future. And it can be reflection in action as well, during a session.
Wow. Thank you. It is so nice to be with all of you. I've been looking at both of the screens and have yet to find anyone I've met before. And I'm absolutely thrilled by that. If I'm overlooking someone that I've known for years, I apologize for not seeing you. But how exciting is this? You know, the slide that you just shared, Anne and Catherine, about reflection and reflexivity will fit perfectly. I use slightly different language, which I'll show you in a moment, but we're on the same pathway here, I'm quite certain. I've worked in a variety of places. I feel enormously privileged. I've had great opportunities to work in just about every kind of organization that exists, and a pretty good, though not adequate, exposure to all the beautiful countries around the world. And that's something I just love to do. I don't remember exactly when it came to mind, but I read Donald Schoen, and I'm just wondering if any of you read his book ages ago, The Reflective Practitioner. Did any of you see that? If not, gosh, I think it must have been written in the early 60s. I'm not sure. But I found it one day in a bookstore and grabbed it and read it. And he points out these two aspects of reflecting in action in our practice and reflecting on our practice as two different things. And I find that so valuable that as practitioners, coaches, we need to learn, as this program suggests, to be able to reflect while we're doing our work, right in the moment, so that we're aware of our feelings, our thoughts in the moment, and use that information to guide us, to adjust us. You'll find that I love metaphors, and I frequently go sea kayaking here on the west coast of the US and up into Canada. And the situation when you're out in the sea is constantly changing. And it's vital that you be able to reflect right while you're doing it, to make adjustments in how you go about paddling, and which direction you go, and how you're going to deal with that wave coming at you in real time. And so if a person can only reflect on action, meaning once you're out of your boat standing on the beach, it's not going to work very well. However, you also need to do that to look back at what happened and what you've learned from previous experiences, so that your skillfulness in reflecting in action is constantly increasing. Yeah. And that's what I'd love to contribute a little bit about today. We won't go on a sea kayaking trip today. I haven't checked the weather or the wind, but we'll use art. How in the world did I come to this? I think one day I was standing, it was probably in Paris. It also occurred in New York City. In Paris at, I think it must have been Musée d'Orsay. And I was standing there, and all of a sudden, I found myself having a conversation with the artist. Now, I might have been looking at something produced 100 years ago or 500 years ago, but all of a sudden, this painting came to life for me. And I began thinking that art is always in the present, because someone has to look at it and interact with it and begin to develop stories about what am I seeing in this piece of art. And I said, my goodness, what if I looked at my clients in the same way? First of all, it's to hold them in very high regard. Wow. Wow. Yes. Nicola, what if I see you as a work of art? What if I see my client as this amazing creation that I certainly didn't create? Yeah. Art requires an encounter. My friend Rick Stone at the Storywork Institute is a spectacular artist and a storyteller. And he and I have worked together a lot, with him interviewing me about this notion of the poetics of coaching. And he's the one who said art is and requires an encounter. So I go to a museum and I look at a Picasso, or I look at Velázquez. We'll come back to him in a moment. And something is going on, whether I like that artist or not. For very good reasons, a lot of people have trouble with Picasso. I won't go into all those reasons. Perhaps you know them. But there is an encounter, whether I like the piece of art or not. And that is a good way for us to experiment with reflecting in practice, reflecting in the middle of the piece of art. Our task together for the next few minutes is to do this bit of work. Next slide, please. That we use an experience, we reflect, and that creates learning, just as Anne and Catherine pointed out. I started training in organization development in about 1981. And this was the fundamental framework that was given. I'm so grateful it's consistent with what we're doing here. I experience something, I reflect on it, and I learn something. And then in a little bit more detail, I identify something that's happening. And I'll tell you, friends, in coaching and in my work as a coaching supervisor, one of the interesting things is whether a coach in practice is able to identify things that are happening. Does that sound peculiar to you? I've encountered coaches who say, well, I don't know what I'm thinking about. I don't know what I'm feeling. So the first task is for us to identify something that's happening. And once we've done that, we're then able to say, well, what's going on here? What's going on here? Am I attracted to my client? Do I want to run away from my client? What in the world? Then I generalize that to say, well, how can I apply that learning to another situation? And I want to share a quick story to help illustrate that. I was working with a client one time. It was in an organization. I don't need to describe the organization. I met this guy for the first time. We were in a small conference room. And after the first 5 minutes, I wanted to run away. In fact, I looked at the door and I calculated whether I could get out that door before he did. I don't know if any of you have ever experienced that before. Good heavens. So I began looking at it and I reflected on what had happened later. And I said, you know what? I just experienced what his organization wanted him to get coached about. That people were frightened in his presence by his mannerisms. Wow. So then generalize, how would I use that knowledge in the future to be aware sooner? Because at first I just wanted to get the heck out of there. But the fact that it was connected to the very mission of the coaching engagement, that took some time. So my generalization was that when I experienced some intense emotion in the middle of talking to my client, that would be a hint more than anybody talking about the coaching engagement. I got it. And if I'd been more centered on that fact, I would have done better coaching for him. Eventually, I said to him, I can't coach you. And which really made him angry. And he went back to the organization and complained about me and then quit, which strangely is exactly what they wanted him to do. So maybe it was good coaching after all. I don't know. Anyway, and he was much happier in his new organization. So that's how I use this framework. And let's see.
Do you want me to go next slide, Sam?
Yeah, go to a poetic expression of our task. Yeah, thank you. Okay, so our task is to open our eyes, and a great reminder of this is this line from an American poet, E.E. Cummings. Now the eyes of my eyes are open. Can I open my eyes and see what I am seeing? I want to experiment with that. If you have a comment or a question, just raise your hand and we'll talk. Another way to look at this, next slide, please, is this notion of empathy. I mean, empathy is pretty central to coaching, wouldn't you say? And one day I wondered, what is empathy? And so I found this statement in a book on empathy. I'll share the title in a moment. Empathy, to viscerally feel what it is like to be the other person in a particular situation or moment. Yeah. What is it like? And when we look at some famous art images, and not so famous, I want you to say what is going on for that other person. or that object. Next slide. So I found this book not long ago, The Empathy Effect by Helen Reese. And I heard her speak, which was really cool. The emotional experience that is evoked by viewing a work of art and feeling one's way into an emotional experience. Early 20th century, the first use of this word, according to Helen. Go down, down to next slide, there we go, right there. Nope, back up. So this comes from Greek, not surprisingly, to feel into, a kinesthetic connection with a painting or a sculpture, a sense of being moved by art, and a profound emotional resonance with it. Think of your clients. Think of your clients and view them this way, a kinesthetic connection with that work of art, that human being, assuming you're coaching human beings, or a dog, if you're a dog whisperer or dog coach or horse or anything else. Being moved. Now, let's experiment with that. So, next slide. Look at this image and tune into it. Tune into it. Let it wash over you. And then be conscious of the story you're telling yourself about this photograph. And I'd love to get 1 or 2 comments right from that slide. Any comments? Love to hear. What are you seeing or hearing? Just open your mic and say it. Now, I have to say, who's doing that talking? Who's talking to you? Next slide. What am I experiencing and feeling and thinking, and the stories I'm creating? Next slide. Who's talking is my internal reflection partner. And I submit our internal reflection partner needs a little bit of training. This is Donald Schoen, my key mentors, Donald Schoen, Frederick Hudson, and Peter Block all rolled together. I didn't comment on the slide earlier, but except for Donald Schoen, Frederick Hudson was the founder of one of the major coaching schools in the United States, the Hudson Institute of Santa Barbara. I was lucky enough to get to work with Frederick before his health made him stop working. But Frederick told me this idea of inside out learning, being conscious of what's going on inside me and extracting the learning from it. And the third one was Peter Block, a major figure in organization development. I got to spend a lot of time with. And Peter was fond of saying, the fact that we're having the conversation is the key. The fact that we're having the conversation. Yeah. And so we're doing that already with this image of the child in the chair. We're having the conversation. Next slide. There we go. All right. Take a moment. Let it slide over you. What questions are you asking yourself? What conversation are you having? Wow. Now, if this is what's happening and this is your client, notice what different directions your coaching would go depending on this first question you ask yourself. If I interact with my client and I say, I'm confused, I go in one direction. If I'm saying, that's beautiful, I go in another direction. If I'm saying, well, I'm seeing the earth from a high place, I go in a different direction. My friends, this first interaction is so important in our work. There was another book I didn't put a slide together on called How Doctors Think. It was research done by a retired physician who determined that when a physician meets a brand new patient, they form an opinion about that patient in the first 10 seconds. And that first opinion affects their diagnosis. Are you kidding me? Are you kidding me? And my daughter is a nurse practitioner. Nurse practitioner is a primary care health provider, typically. And I asked her about that, and she said, absolutely true, and began telling me stories. First seeing. Am I seeing what I'm seeing? Am I hearing the stories I'm telling myself? Wow. Okay. Let's get another image. Oh, wait. Keep that one up. Back up. Ha. In fact, I am in a marina with a lot of boats. The water is very calm inside the marina. And I'm looking down at the water, and it is a reflection of the bow of the boat into the water. And so, in fact, it is a reflection. And if there was some wind, it would be completely disturbed, the surface, the mirror of water. And it's funny because the bow has this very shiny metal on it. So in fact, if you study this carefully, there's reflection going back and forth between the two. Love it. Yeah, and yes, it's my photograph. As the child in the chair, it was my photograph as well. So let's go to another complex image, the next one. Now, you might have seen this. Again, let it wash over you. Let it wash over you. Mm-hmm. And now that you've looked at it, open your eyes, as E.E. Cummings suggested. What's your story about what you saw and your thinking? Did I phrase that in a way that you understand? Hold yourself in your first reaction and think about that. You guys are fabulous. Thank you for doing this work with me. Now, I want to take this a little bit farther and try an experiment, as Catherine and Anne have proposed. I have never done the following, and so I'm leaping into the deep water here. Next slide, and please click on the link and just listen for a couple of minutes.
During his career as a painter for King Philip IV of Spain, Diego Velázquez painted what is often considered one of his most profound pieces, Las Meninas. Commissioned by the king himself in 1656, the painting features an assortment of characters who were relatively important to Philip and his court. At the center of the painting stands Infanta Margaret Teresa, the roughly 5-year-old princess. Doting on her at both sides are the figures the painting is named after, Las Meninas, the ladies in waiting. Other significant individuals present in the painting include Maria Barbola and Nicolásito Pertusato. two court dwarves on the right edge of the painting, and Velázquez himself, who stands in front of his easel, paintbrush in hand. So besides a royal presence, what makes Las Meninas so significant? Beyond Velázquez's ability to create texture and movement and replicate his subject's physical qualities, the painting's claim to fame is its mystery. The out-of-view canvas, whose unseen subject has captured everyone's attention, even that of the hazy figure in the back who seems to be exiting the painting. If you look closely, it becomes clear that King Philip IV and his queen, Mariana of Austria, are drawing these stairs. The royal couple are reflected in a mirror in the painting's background. Interestingly, this puts the viewer in the royal couple's place. Known as a painting about a painting, the illusionary piece is just one of many pieces that made Velázquez stand out among his 17th century peers.
What are you thinking about? We're engaged with this painting now. We're encountering something. What's going on for you? You know, in a story my friend Rick Stone shared, he was sharing some artwork, and one person said, "This is certainly not what you're saying, Andrea," but this guy said, "Well, I don't like modern art, and so I don't see anything." And Rick said to this guy, "Describe what you're seeing. Just describe it." And the guy began saying, "Well, there's a line that goes up this way, and there's a color on this side that's different from the color on that side." Yeah. And this was a famous painting. The paint is thick here and thin here. He began without making an evaluative statement. Do I like it? Do I not like it? Just describe it. So with our clients, we might gain some advantage sometimes by saying, let me just describe this client to myself. Or a question to our client who's dealing with the situation. Just describe the situation to me. Tell me what you're seeing. Gosh, what an opportunity that creates for reflexivity. And it's a skill to develop. It's not automatic, right? So this is a skill for our reflection partner to develop, to notice when we're disconnecting from the encounter. And maybe the reflection partner just says, "Excuse me, Sam, what are you thinking about right now?" Great, so wonderful. Well, I think we should go on with the next phase of the experiment. And this will be in small groups of 3 or 4 people. And maybe you could write these questions down for yourself, because they'll go away, I think, when we go to small groups. When you get to your small group.
They're in the chat.
Oh, spectacular. Thank you. When you get to your small group, spend a few minutes getting a clear image, an encounter, if you will, with a client, a person you're working with. Imagine you're seeing a great painting. You're walking through a museum. Doesn't have to be the Prado. It could be Museum of Modern Art. I don't care where. But you're in a museum. You're seeing a great painting. Now, walk around as we saw in Velázquez. Who is in this image? And where are you? Think of the king and queen in the mirror. So they're maybe outside the room looking in. Maybe they're one of the ladies in waiting. What's around you? What else is going on? And look carefully. Is there a subtle element that might be overlooked? For example, the tear in the Picasso, or the little red water pitcher that one of the ladies in waiting is offering to the princess. Did you see the picture? Did you see the little red pitcher? Yeah. And number 6, empathy. What is happening in you as you reflect on this art? So I would suggest we're going to have we're going to have 25 minutes, and Catherine, because we're just perfectly ahead. And take some time, maybe 5 minutes or even 10 minutes, whatever you need together, to write and get some answers to these questions, and then share them. After 5 or 10 minutes, then share and talk about it with your colleagues. All right? I think the first thing that I'd love to hear from you is your experience of having that conversation. What struck you? What did you notice about doing that little piece of reflection? So it's, if you go to an art museum and you stand next to someone you know and someone you don't know, their stories about the painting, if they're really paying attention, are completely different. And if you go with a docent or a guide, it's an interesting thing. I find that very valuable because they've studied the work, but some of it's kind of rehearsed, you know? And it's different going with a guide to look at pieces of art than to experience it by myself. They're both valuable. They're both valuable, but they're very different. Yeah. Fascinating, fascinating. And I'm sure many of you have worked with clients where you asked members of a team of some kind to draw a picture of their organization. You know, I'm sure you've done that. And what the different perspectives are. Yeah. Looking at the same organization, except they don't experience it as the same organization. We live in the middle of our stories. And as Peter Block said, the fact that we're having the conversation about it is the key. Yep. And keep experimenting with different approaches, you know. Yeah. But what your comment makes me think of Velázquez and the painting, that the huge painting that he's working on while all of this is going around, right? Mm-hmm. And we never get to see the painting he's working on.
Right.
So it's a whole different thing to imagine us being Velázquez, painting a picture, maybe of our clients, maybe of ourselves. Maybe Velázquez is our client and we're asking him what he's seeing. Hey, what are you painting over there? I don't know. There isn't a right way to do it. But doing it is the right way. This is a long-term process. And by training my internal reflection partner, I went Yeah, I want him or her or them or I don't know how many partners I've got in my head. My wife says I have a whole committee up there who advise me. But over time, I want them to help me be conscious of my biases. And I've got a few that I'm pretty conscious of. And when I encounter them, at least that person up there is going whack. You're reacting out of that bias instead of seeing this painting with fresh eyes. You know, I don't get to work in person these days because I work with people in various locations other than my house. And it would be so cool to take a supervisee to a museum and just practicing noticing what we notice and talking about it. I think that could build the muscle of this internal reflection partner.
Yeah.
So if you get to work face to face, go to a museum, go to a park, go to the beach, go to a forest, go to a poor city. You know, all of those are works of art, in my view. Go encounter them and see what you can learn.
I would even add some that even for our coaches, this is a very interesting piece of work to bring them, whatever, in a museum or in the nature, walk with them side by side and work in another way to help them create and reinforce this muscle of different lenses about reality, a lens about oneself, about consciousness, about what are my biases as well in the organization I'm working with. That's a wonderful approach.
One of my best coaching sessions was with a man who lived in a very open part of the United States, where once upon a time there had been volcanoes and volcanic flow, and it was one of his favorite places to go. And so he was making some very difficult decisions for himself. And I said, let's go for a walk in a place you love. And so we put on our hiking boots and I followed him. He led me over the rocks and around for the longest time. And in a half day, I probably asked 2 questions. And finally, I was standing behind him and I said, so what do you want to do with your life? And we walked on for a few more minutes and he turned around and stopped and turned around probably. And he said, I want to live. I want to stay alive. Voila. End of coaching. I never saw him again. It was great.
Thank you so much, Sam. It was a real great pleasure. So exciting.